Coming to you live from Johannesburg, this is Fridays with Tim Modise. Tomorrow is South Africa's big day, as all eyes will be on the inauguration of President Cyril Ramaphosa at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria. Ramaphosa assumes the responsibilities after raising the hopes of the nation with his campaign of Tumamina and the New Dawn. The president is expected to announce his new cabinet on Sunday, and we're asking, what can we expect from the sixth administration? The agenda is already defined by issues of high unemployment, an ailing economy and corruption, and those are the big issues facing the country at the moment. The decision by the United Kingdom to leave the European Union has claimed the second Prime Minister in 3 years, and earlier today, UK Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, Theresa May, resigned due to complications around Brexit. But how is this development going to affect British relations with South Africa and the world? We'll try and answer that. Young people across Africa held a 3-day gathering to discuss their future on the continent. The theme of the Breaking Down Borders Africa Youth Summit was Reclaiming Africa, and the issues there were to encourage youth participation in governance, in social change and the economy. We'll be discussing the resolutions and programs that emanate from there. And finally, celebrated South African musician Kabelo Mapalani will be talking to us about his trials, tribulations and success. Mr. Bugalove of TKZ fame is a fitness fanatic. He's also the author of the book, I Ran for My Life. You can be part of our conversation this evening. You call us on 011-759-6340 or talk to us using the hashtag Fridays with Tim Modise. But first, Andrea van Wyk with the latest news. Andrea.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening. Eskom's facing yet another leadership crisis. Group Chief Executive Officer Phakamani Hadebe will step down in July. He's citing health reasons for his resignation. The Eskom board has expressed its gratitude to him for his commitment and ensuring leadership stability. Hadebe was acting CEO for 4 months before being permanently appointed a year ago. He replaced 2 controversial CEOs, namely Brian Molefe and Matsela Koko. During his tenure, Eskom reached stage 4 load shedding for the very first time. Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan is challenging the Public Protector's findings against him. He's arguing Busisiwe Mkhobane's report is wrong and unlawful. He wants the report to be placed under review immediately. Mkhobane has found him guilty of improper conduct related to the approval of early retirement with full pension benefits for former Deputy SARS Commissioner Ivan Pillay. Gordhan is also questioning the timing of the report. He's accusing the Public Protector of trying to divert attention from tomorrow's presidential inauguration. Pillay is also calling on the findings to be placed under review.
The benefits to which an employee is entitled to on early retirement are regulated by this section and occur by operation of the law. So there's no ministerial approval which is required. Minister Gordhan's conduct violated, in fact, was amounted to an improper conduct.
Former President Jacob Zuma says he's unhappy with the lack of cooperation from the NPA, but he's confident in his defence team and the way they're handling his case. He and French arms company Thales will know in 3 months whether their corruption case will continue. The KwaZulu-Natal High Court has reserved judgment in the matter. Zuma addressed hordes of his supporters after his appearance in court today.
Feeling fine, there's absolutely no problem, except that the selectiveness in terms of information that is put out there is a problem, which was discussed at the final end of the court. It's a problem because every information must be out. As far as I believe, as a person who lives in this country where the law, democracy, prosecution should do it without fear or favor. So you can't hide some information and leave others. That's my worry.
So do you think your team put up a good case?
Absolutely. Wonderful case.
Newly appointed NPA Head of Investigations, Hermione Cronje, says she's ready for the task that lies ahead. She was speaking at a media briefing in Pretoria, where she was officially introduced to the public.
I'm aware that our institutions are in a poor state, particularly the institutions represented at this table. I'm also aware of the problem in our state-owned enterprises and the need to send a strong message that those who pocket for their own personal gain funds earmarked for the development of our country and for meeting the needs of our people will face the consequences of their actions.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has resigned. Her last day in office will be on the 7th of June. May will step down as party leader on the same day. The process to select a new Tory leader will start the following week. Now, her announcement comes after her various failed attempts to negotiate a Brexit deal.
I negotiated the terms of our exit and a new relationship with our closest neighbours that protects jobs, our security and our union. I have done everything I can to convince MPs to back that deal. Sadly, I have not been able to do so. I tried 3 times. I believe it was right to persevere, even when the odds against success seemed high. But it is now clear to me that it is in the best interests of the country for a new Prime Minister to lead that effort. So I am today announcing that I will resign as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party on Friday the 7th of June, so that a successor can be chosen. I've agreed with the party chairman and with the chairman of the 1922 committee that the process for electing a new leader should begin in the following week. I have kept Her Majesty the Queen fully informed of my intentions, and I will continue to serve as her Prime Minister until the process has concluded. It is, and will always remain, a matter of deep regret to me that I have not been able to deliver Brexit. It will be for my successor to seek a way forward that honours the result of the referendum. To succeed, he or she will have to find consensus in Parliament where I have not.
Well, the scene is set for Cyril Ramaphosa's inauguration as president tomorrow. The ceremony will take place at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria. For the first time, the public will be allowed to attend the main event. Presidential spokesperson Khosela Diko says no one will be allowed into the stadium without accreditation.
There's 2 different types of accreditation. One is for heads of state, invited guests that include your judiciary, the clergy, traditional leaders and so forth. And those were the people who would have received the letters and they would form part of the entourage that accompanies the president. Then all of us, members of the public, we have been invited. This is a 32,000-seater stadium. It has been brought here outside of the Union building, so all of us are able to come through. Now, in order to gain access for the purposes of crowd control, there has been a request that firstly, those who are driving to Pretoria, they must park their cars at the Tshwane Event Centre. They will then get shuttled to the Afrikaans Hoërseun School, which is just opposite me here at the stadium, and there they will get their wristbands. Also, those who are walking, who come from Pretoria and the surrounding areas, they'll also start at the Afrikaans Hoërseun School, so-called AFIS, and they will get their wristbands there. So I think the problem really has been around communication and making sure that we get this message out.
Well, we'll have more news for you at 9 o'clock. Back to you, Tim.
And thanks very much, Andrea. And in the program, the inauguration of President-elect Cyril Ramaphosa takes place on the 56th anniversary of Africa Day. And most of the continent will be represented at the event by heads of state. Ramaphosa, his ministers in the presidency and the Chief Justice were at Loftus Stadium today for a final rehearsal together with a battalion of SANDF forces who will be present for the first time. Governor Whittles filed this report.
An African-style inauguration taking place in a stadium with African heads of state in attendance. The presidency says it's expecting a strong delegation from South Africa's neighbours.
We are just able to confirm that the heads of states in the SADC region have all been invited.
On Friday, the president of Tanzania, John Magufuli, was one of the first to touch down in Pretoria. This will be the first inauguration that former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe won't attend. And it's speculated whether Botswana President Mokgweetsi Masisi will be there. His government recently banned Energy Minister Jeff Radebe's wife, Bridget, from entering Botswana, accusing her of trying to unseat him. But the SADC heads of state are not the only ones invited.
We've invited the representatives from the blocs, the African bloc, economic blocs.
Inviting these high-profile guests from across the continent is seen as a move to strengthen South Africa's position. This as Ramaphosa takes over as African Union chairperson next year. Govin Whittles, Pretoria.
Thanks, Govin, for that report. President Cyril Ramaphosa's election is raising hopes that the economy will improve. What will be the highlight as his key action items? And tonight I'm joined by economist Lumkile Mondi and political analyst Kaya Sithole. And gentlemen, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good evening.
I appreciate your time and, of course, your insights. And I know that we brought the futurist here, Kaya, who I think, was it in December last year, already predicted that somehow heads were going to roll at Escom, and Pagamile unfortunately had to resign. What were you reading into the situation as early as then?
Look, I think for me, it was really at the point in time where you had this question of that accountability vacuum that was created by the president then saying there's a board who's been appointed and there's a CEO who's been appointed, and yet you had all these other parallel structures. And really what created those parallel structures is that the board of Eskom said to the president, look, you've given us the task of identifying what the issues are, and these are the solutions that we're proposing. But of course, the president was not in a position to sell those solutions to the unions whose support he needed ahead of a general election. And what he then did is that he kept creating all these other random parallel structures. So suddenly the question was, well, who's accountable to who? You had the task team whose responsibility was supposed to be technical, and then thereafter there was another team, I don't even know what their responsibility was, and then at the budget speech you heard that there was going to be a restructuring officer. So my view was that Pagamani being emasculated from his position simply made his position untenable. If he couldn't convince the board and the minister that he was fit to run the organization, then of course they were not going to make it.
And of course, the significance of this announcement today that Pagamani is leaving Eskom is important, because Eskom is at the center of the economic problems that the president has to face head-on.
Don't understate it by calling it a problem. It's an economic crisis. Eskom owes over 500 billion rand, and I think a lot of people don't actually understand what that means. It simply means that if somebody said, here's the country's budget tomorrow, let us fix Eskom, half of the country's budget would go towards just paying the debt of Eskom.
And of course, we say Eskom owes 500 billion rands, and to add to what you're saying, in fact, we owe 500.
Yes, of course, we do.
We owe 500. Lumkile? And that's the agenda already. It's set for the president, right? There's one problem that he's got to solve right away.
And also, more importantly, the first quarter of this year, we expect a negative growth, and probably going on to this current quarter that we're in, Tim, given the power outages that we had in the first quarter. More importantly, Tim, is that, being so highly indebted and having no economic plan or agenda of inclusivity, of how do we bring in the millions of South Africans as a labor market who are trapped in this economic crisis that Kaya was alluding to. So he's got his work cut out.
Yeah, but let's identify other issues that you think will be foremost in the president's speech tomorrow when he promises whatever. I mean, we know about the new dawn, but he's got to give shape to that new dawn. He's got the mandate now to lead South Africa for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think obviously last year all he had was just like a limited sense of legitimacy where people said, well, we've actually never put you to the test at the ballot and asked the citizens of the country if they think that you're the right person to lead them for the next 5 years. He now has that particular mandate, and unfortunately, what happens when you get that mandate is that your accountability moves away from Luthuli House, it becomes to society in general. So what he has to then amplify tomorrow is really what are the issues that are affecting South Africans. Never mind that civil war that's brought out at Luthuli House between him and his Secretary General and the multiple factions. His commitment tomorrow should be to say to South Africans, here's my agenda for the next 5 years. You've given me a majority, as slim as it might have been. You've given me an opportunity to lead your country for the next 5 years. These are the issues that I've identified are key to us working together over the next 5 years, and this is how I'm going to solve them.
Yeah, and I see, Lumkile, then you're smiling there when, when Kaya talks about civil war at Luthuli House. But be that as it may, the message has got to be coherent, and we've had other people from within the ANC saying it doesn't matter what the president may promise. He's got to stick to the resolutions of the NASREC conference. So given the emerging challenges, right? I mean, it's a crisis in the case of Escom. It's a serious problem in the case of the economy, and so many expectations in relation to the resolutions. How does the president balance that?
He's been very clear when he was elected as a president, that he's a president that's going to work across political lines. Therefore, a number of these resolutions that were adopted in December 2017 are just going to go out of the window. Remember, one of the resolutions revolves around the central bank, the Reserve Bank. And I just think with this country so highly indebted and having challenges around growth, that resolution, I think, is going to go out of the window. There's also a resolution around land. I think the land also was a debate imposed on the ANC by the economic freedom fighters. I think, given the history of lack of movement 25 years on by the ANC around land reforms, it's unlikely also to see its day. So what we're going to see is really going to see a president that's going to implement a unifying agenda, more like a Deng, because he's been talking a lot about Deng shopping of China. So he's going to be saying, what, I'm Ramaphosa, I want to create my own legacy. In that regard, it's the legacy of inclusivity at political level, of trying to work together political parties, whilst alienating his movement that has put him there.
I see also that there's a social media campaign that was being started by the presidency this afternoon. It's called #WeThePeople.
Yes.
And encouraging them.
People's inauguration.
Yeah. So, but I mean, on the basis of what Lumkile says, is there room, you believe, that for the president to maneuver? And let's not forget that we've seen signs of what's going on within what you call the civil war, with some of the members of the ANC who are on the parliamentary list withdrawing. And immediately after the inauguration tomorrow, he's got to announce his cabinet. So, let's stay a little bit on the civil war that you say is going on.
Look, of course, the underpinning, issues relating to that civil war at the Tuli House is really the question of, is this the type of president who's going to champion the resolutions that were actually adopted in NASREC? Most of the resolutions quite simply make little economic sense, but of course the people that congregated at NASREC during that week in December 2017 didn't have that as the foremost thing on their agenda. It was simply a matter of political considerations. So one of the things that I actually said last week when I wrote a column for the Business Day was to simply say he could do what Jacob Zuma did, and to really then say, in all of the contentious issues, whether you're talking about the Reserve Bank or you're talking about the land expropriation conversations, what Jacob Zuma did very well is that he then identified the most incompetent ministers he could find to then deal with those types of portfolios. So if you look at Faith Mutambi being put in communications, it was simply to stall the type of resolutions that the ANC had put in there. So he can then say, oh, I'm putting this into place. I've got a minister who's doing it, and then the minister's not doing her job. That's why Faith Mutambi was so useful to Jacob Zuma. And remember, the communications ministry had multiple ministers. You had Yunus Karim, you had Dina Pule, you had Faith Mutambi, and everyone else, simply because he said, the ANC has said this, but practically I cannot put it into place. It's the same thing with the land development when you talk about Gugu and Quindi. Gugu and Quindi was remarkably incompetent, but it served Jacob Zuma very well, because he could simply say, I've committed to it, but the minister's not doing it.
I mean, the President Cyril Ramaphosa, I understand how you're saying it. He's not as cynical as all that, and probably would not go out of his way to appoint incompetent people in order to slow things down. I mean, so that work is cut out. Right?
As he pushed himself as a Deng of South Africa, he talks about capability and competency. So I think to an extent, because people are going to judge him according to the quality of the leadership he brings on the table, whether he'll be able to really work harder to help create a state capacity and a competent bureaucracy led by competent people. So he's a very sensitive person. I think the president will ensure that he brings in all strong people, because we're going to judge him according to that.
He's accountable to something called the National Working Committee, and we all know what makes that up. I mean, one of the most prominent people in the National Working Committee is Nomvula Mokonyane, whom we must agree is probably very aggrieved wherever she's sitting right now, because obviously she's been forced one way or another not to put her hand forward to go into national parliament. So ideally he will be able to say, look, these are the people that I want, but the ANC still has this multiple levels of conflation between itself and the state, where sometimes people who run the ANC think that the ANC is the state. So we have that problem going on, and all I'm saying is that all he's going to be able to do is to identify the types of ministries he wants to hold dear to himself, and that must be the social economic cluster, and says these are the ones ones where I'm going to issue the directive to say these are the people that go in, and then in all the other ministries where absolutely nobody knows what's going on in
everything
there,
else, everything else ultimately must speak to economic growth, isn't it? Economic
absolutely.
Growth has got impact on job opportunities, because it's a disaster.
You're assuming that the people that work within the ANC actually understand that articulation and that link between really putting people, competent people in particular positions, and how it translates to economic growth and how that actually assists their prospects in the future. My understanding of the ministers I've engaged with and the politicians within the ANC is that their ability to understand how these things link to each other is very limited.
Sure.
These people cannot understand that if Escom is not performing, what does it mean, not just for the people at Escom, but for all the other industries that are affected by what happens at Escom.
I just want to find out from you as well, Luke. I mean, I would think that when you get elected president and you get the news, the information that the economy is continuing to bleed jobs, that 55% of young people are not learning or are not in school or institutions of training and learning and are without jobs, that is, I don't know what word to use to describe that should exercise your mind. And of course you have an economy that's not going to create the jobs immediately. And of course you've got all kinds of stories about the widespread corruption, especially within the state machinery. Where do you start?
Tim, we know about the ANC. The ANC is about political power. Because political power enables you to dish out patronage within a bigger party. So if you look, I mean, you go back to 1993, around the Reconstruction and Development Program, which is a program which was developed, which was inclusive, and then also parallel to it, the ANC has had the Macroeconomic Research Group, also a think tank of academics who aligned to the movement. And basically, on the eve of the election, they ditched everything and went on with the liberalization, deregulation policy, which eventually was called Growth, Employment and Redistribution. And even then, that team, which was called Class of 96 Project, went on its own outside the party, and it's one of the concoctions that led to the contestation Polokwane around the economic program. So generally, your typical ANC member can't translate the political power into economic development and therefore drive economic development so that when the ANC stands up on an election, they stand up on a successful ticket. They always rely on political power rather than an economic program that will bring those masses of our people remain trapped 25 years later.
But I suppose voters have spoken, right? And they've elected the representatives, and we've seen the dynamics change there. Don't you think that the political parties in parliament themselves will drive President Cyril Ramaphosa to make sure that he fixes what needs to be fixed very urgently?
I think what they'll do is they'll focus on the things that they understand very well. So when people talk about corruption, you can sort of see manifestations of it. But really what the country is missing is just an overhaul of the underlying structural systems that then sort of create an economic system that works for people, an inclusive education system and a progressive one. So the structural issues are so very badly understood by politicians across the board. If you go back to any of their manifestos even now, you will not actually have an idea that any of them actually understand what the state of the country is. You really have a problem here where a lot of young people are not employed, but that's not the issue. The young people are not employable simply because the nature of the workplace is evolving at a much faster rate than the type of skills they're able to attain, should they be able to attain the skills. Most of them aren't even in the skills flow pipeline anyway. So, of course, what you're seeing here is that even if you say tomorrow there's 10,000 new jobs available, you might find that there aren't 10,000 people to fill the jobs simply because of the evolution in the workplace. Now, the issue here is that you then want a government that then says, this is the plan that we commit to.
But
when you talk about
the president has raised the nation's hopes, you see. Everybody believes that that's the right man who's going to make sure that things are transformed substantially.
I think it was only because of the 50 million citizens that we have is probably the only one who gets us closest to the solution of the type of president that we need.
Okay. You can also quickly speculate on who you think will make it into cabinet or won't make it.
Just to add on the structural reforms that are required, not only is the state, it's also the business sector. The business is clueless about inclusivity, about really coming to the party, because we saw after 1994, we expected them to play a bigger role in investment, in creating opportunities. They went their own way. That is why it's important for the president tomorrow to talk about how we're going to be creating this development coalition where labor, community, business can come together to create a momentum. As the state restructure, business invests to create that momentum. And on the on the cabinet, the only guess that I have is that the Minister of Finance is going to be Tito Mboweni. I'm not so sure about Mrs.
I think Barbara Christie stands a very good chance. She's run the provincial finances quite well. The problem I have with Tito Mboweni is that he's been trying to tweet himself out of a job ever since he got the job. So, of course, you get the impression that he doesn't want it. But the fact that he was sworn in as an MP indicates that he will, at least for the next few months, carry on.
I thought you guys will speculate very briefly on the position of the deputy president.
I've already speculated.
No, you've got those.
I've already on Lindiwe, because I think Lindiwe, for the ANC, she'll bring back the continuity around its legacy. If it wants to reunify itself and self-correct, I think she'll be right candidate to do that.
I think the biggest risk that the ANC has is how alienated and how aggrieved my people in KZN feel. So, of course, you know exactly what that means.
All right.
People in KZN are very angry since 2017.
Kaya and Lumkile, thank you very much for having been my guest, and I enjoyed talking to you. And, of course, you know, the optimism that's out there, you tempered it a little bit, and people will say, well, you know, we thought, how could this guy spoil our Friday night like this? After the break, we will be talking about Brexit and Theresa May's resignation.